The city was drowning that evening. Rain fell like a curtain over flickering neon lights, painting everything in a silver haze. People rushed for shelter under umbrellas and awnings. But one man sat still on a lonely bench, completely soaked, staring into the storm as if it was the only thing left worth watching. His name was Dustin, a man who found strange comfort in the chaos of the rain. To him, it wasn't just water falling from the sky. It was a reminder that even heaven had to cry sometimes. As thunder echoed between tall buildings, she appeared. A woman, mysterious, elegant, beautiful in a way that made the entire street feel quieter. She stopped by the same bench, looking slightly irritated at the downpour, but there was something else in her eyes too, something restless. Dustin looked up at her and without thinking said, "Hey, gorgeous, anyone sitting here?" The woman tilted her head, clearly not expecting that from a stranger soaked to the bone. "It's wet," she replied, her tone dry and amused. Dustin smiled. "Perfect," he said softly. "The city looks better when it's wet. Makes people honest." She rolled her eyes but sat down, letting the rain trickle down her face. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to sound casual, but his voice trembled slightly. "Does wetting your jeans usually work as a pickup line?" she said with a smirk. "Only when I'm trying to buy someone a coffee," Dustin replied. For a moment she looked at him, really looked as if deciding whether this drenched stranger was a fool or something else entirely. Then she smiled, stood up, and whispered, "Maybe next time, stranger," and just like that. She was gone, swallowed by the fog and rain, leaving Dustin with a heartbeat louder than the thunder. Days turned into weeks. Dustin went back to his quiet, lonely job, a driver for the rich, ferrying people to meetings and parties he'd never be invited to. He didn't mind. The car was his kingdom and silence was his throne. But one morning his boss, Mr. Howard, called him into the office. A man of authority and polished cruelty, Mr. Howard said, "You'll be driving my daughter from now on. She has regular medical appointments. Be on time, be discreet." Dustin nodded. He wasn't the kind to ask questions. Moments later he heard footsteps descending the grand staircase, soft, measured, almost musical. When he looked up, his breath caught in his throat. It was her, the woman from the rain. The stranger who had once smiled and walked away. "Dustin, this is Chloe," Mr. Howard said proudly. "My daughter." She gave a polite nod, her expression unreadable. He didn't say a word, only forced a professional smile. But inside, he was shaken. The universe, it seemed, was playing tricks. The drive that day was quiet. The air between them felt heavy with unspoken recognition. After several minutes, she broke the silence. "So, driver," she said, her tone teasing, "do you always pick up women in the rain?" Dustin chuckled. "Only the ones who don't run from it." She looked out the window, hiding a small smile. "You dropped my number that night, didn't you?" He blinked in surprise. "You saw that?" She nodded. "I did. But don't worry. That wasn't even my number. It was a pizza place. I give it to everyone." Dustin laughed quietly. "A pizza place? That's cruel." "Maybe," she replied softly, "but waiting for calls that never come is worse." After that day, things changed. Dustin drove her everywhere, to appointments, parties, dinners with people she clearly despised. He noticed how she avoided mirrors, how her smile always seemed borrowed, how her laughter ended before it began. She was beautiful, yes, but fragile like a flame in a storm. Every day she wore a mask for the world, and every day Dustin saw the cracks forming behind it. One afternoon, after another silent drive from her treatment, Chloe suddenly said, "Take me somewhere else." Dustin looked at her in the rearview mirror. "Where to?" he asked. "Anywhere," she said. "Just not home." He didn't ask questions. He just drove. Out of the city, past the noise, until the world turned quiet again. They ended up at an old, abandoned outdoor movie theater, the kind that hadn't played a film in years. The rain still hadn't stopped, and the seats were glistening with water. "You brought me here?" Chloe asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," Dustin replied. "Movies don't always need a screen." She laughed genuinely this time, the sound breaking the silence like sunlight through clouds. They sat together, sharing a melted ice cream he'd bought earlier. "I like it with nuts," she said casually. Noted. Dustin smiled. For hours they talked about everything. Her illness, her father's control, her fear of being forgotten. She told him about the engagement her father had arranged to a man she barely knew named Anthony. "My dad says he's perfect," she whispered bitterly. "Perfectly boring, maybe." Dustin said nothing, but his silence said everything. The following evening, the engagement was announced officially. Dustin stood in the background, dressed in black, pretending not to exist. Guests toasted, music played, and Chloe smiled for the cameras. But when her eyes found his across the room, that smile faltered. After the event, he drove her home, and the car was silent again until he finally said, "Why marry someone you don't love?" She didn't look at him. "'Cause love doesn't pay for hospitals," she said coldly. He didn't reply. Instead, he turned down a different road, one that led nowhere near her house. They drove until the city lights disappeared. When the car stopped, they were at a quiet lake, silver under the moonlight. Chloe got out, the wind tangling her hair, and whispered, "My father's afraid I'll be alone. But he never asked what I want." Dustin looked at her, heart pounding. "What do you want, Chloe?" She met his eyes, and for the first time, he saw the truth, the exhaustion, the longing, the surrender. "To feel alive," she whispered, "even if it kills me." He didn't think. He just stepped forward, closed the distance between them, and kissed her. The rain came again, soft, forgiving, endless. For that moment, nothing else existed. Not her illness, not her father, not the life waiting back home. Just two lost souls finding each other in the middle of nowhere. When morning came, the world felt different. The rain had stopped, and sunlight crept across the horizon. Dustin woke up to the sound of birds and the faint smell of coffee, but Chloe was gone. Only her scarf remained, lying across the passenger seat like a goodbye letter written in silence. He tried calling, but there was no answer.